Thank you for joining us for a virtual day trip to wine country. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events, and we are excited to be here on this Wine Wednesday. Today, this evening, we are going to the Finger Lakes region in New York State, which for those of you who aren't familiar, New York State has almost 500 wineries. So it is a very significant and major wine growing region. And in the Finger Lakes region, which is the largest of the 4 primary wine growing areas and wine regions in New York State, there are well over 100 wineries. I think it's north of 150 actually. And it's a source of world-class, cool climate wines, particularly Riesling, which some people may be familiar with New York State Rieslings, which have come to become they've come to be known as world-class for very good reason. And I do want to show in my background here just where we are headed in New York State. We are way upstate, and if you can see right to the right of my head there, you'll see 4 or 5 sort of fingers of lake water well north in New York State there. Those are the Finger Lakes. And we are going to one of the largest of those, which is Seneca Lake. And where we're headed is Fulkerson Winery, which is the oldest continuously operated Finger Lakes farm and family run since 1805. One of the cool things about this evening too, which I love because I'm a huge fan of discovering new grape varietals and understanding what they're all about and expanding our horizons in terms of the wines that we drink and the grape varietals that make those wines. This evening, we will encounter not only Riesling, which is well known and as a grape varietal and in New York State, but also 3 additional types of grapes, which may be new for some of you watching. So I hope it'll be very interesting for everybody. There are 3 grapes that I myself am not particularly familiar with, and so I'm really interested in hearing about the wines that are made from those grapes. Fulkerson's calling card, Fulkerson Winery, is farm first, and we're going to hear about that farm first part of who they are and the DNA of the winery. And that's because the farm goes back to the 19th century. Originally, they grew black raspberries and other fruits and produce. Eventually, the farm added grapes and then later started making wine. So it's a fascinating story and family legacy. If you want to learn all about Fulkerson Winery, I recommend that you go to fulkersonwinery.com. I'm going to put the URL up behind me in the background. And also, behind me there in the background is not only the URL to the winery, but some information about the offer tonight, which is if you order 6 bottles or more of these wines, and they're very, very affordably priced, you will get 20% off at checkout. So it's fulkersonwinery.com in case you're curious and want to check it out while we're talking. And last but not least, welcome to the broadcast. It's great to have everybody logging in. We've got lots of people super interested in tonight. I also want to let everyone know that if you are watching, hit us up in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. And then, of course, if you have questions along the way while we're chatting with 2 great folks from the winery, put those questions in the chat module or in the Q&A module in Zoom and let us know what you want to hear about, and we will answer those questions live and on the fly as we're talking tonight. So it's my pleasure to host a 7th generation member of the Fulkerson family, Steve Fulkerson, from the winery, and also sales director Cindy Hogue. Welcome, Steve and Cindy. It's great having you guys this evening.
Great being here.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you, Sam.
Well, thank you. I'm sure it's good and wintry up there right now, but we're going to warm up with some wine, so we're excited about that. So I first want to start off by asking a question about Farm First. Farm First is a key part of your brand. It's a pillar of who you are as a winery. What do you mean by Farm First?
So farm first is kind of our core philosophy. Without the farm, we wouldn't have good raw material. And without good raw material, we're not going to make good wine. And without good wine, we're not going to be able to sell that good wine to fine folks like yourselves. So we, for the past 200 and now, 15, 16 years, we've taken very good care of our land and continue to do so with good agricultural practices. We're always learning, we're always educating ourselves on the latest and greatest technologies, as well as just being good stewards of the land in order to keep it for future generations. I'm number 7. My daughter, who was born 2 years ago Halloween, is 8. So I hope that with her children, it'll be 9th generation in the next 30 years or so. So
That's great. And so when you talk about stewardship of the land, I mean, are you officially a sustainably grown and sustainably farmed winery?
So sustainable is a 4-part kind of philosophy. We do our best to be as sustainable as possible as far as your traditional understanding of sustainable farming. A lot of people have a notion that organics or sustainable means, no pesticide use, no chemical use of any kind, and that's really a misnomer. What our philosophies really are is balanced and what we call in the industry integrated pest management. So if something does not need to be done, we evaluate the risk involved in those things, and then we make a determination. We're always using the low end of chemicals that we do use, and the number one compound in, for example, grape spray is sulfur, which is elemental sulfur, brimstone, and is labeled organic. And that is really to combat disease, mainly. And the diseases that are protected, or that sulfur protects grapes from, is mildews. And what they can do is they can result in leaves completely falling off the vine. And in a wet, cool area like the Finger Lakes, preventative maintenance is a necessity. Therefore, we do it. But we're always out there making sure if there's no pressure, we don't need to do it, or we need to, or we can use less material. So
Right.
And then, of course, without grapes, we can't have staff, and the community sustainability is also a major part of our philosophy.
So would you say that it's sort of your approach is minimal intervention as opposed to?
That would be accurate, yes.
Yeah, right. So now I'm fascinated by the Finger Lakes, and I've put up in my background here a shot of, this is an aerial photo over the farm and the winery and the vineyard looking at the lake, Seneca Lake. I remember flying a few years ago during this time of year. It was dead of winter, and I looked down out of the window seat I was in, and we were at cruising altitude of 35,000 feet or whatever, and I saw these giant bodies of water that were incredibly narrow and really long, even from 35,000 feet. It was dramatic. And luckily I had a Wi-Fi connection on the plane. I was able to go on Google Maps and look at what the Finger Lakes look like, and then look back out the window and see them with my own eyes. And this photo, which you gave me, Stephen, the other day, struck me because for those of you watching, we're looking in my background at Seneca Lake, which it's a little deceptive. It looks really narrow there. It looks like you could easily swim across. It's about a mile or a mile plus there. but left to right, north to south, it's 38 miles long. And in the middle there, even though it's incredibly narrow, it's 600 and something feet deep. What is having this lake ecosystem and climate and the environment that it brings? What does it mean for the growing of grapes, and how does that interact with vineyards? And it's such a fertile region for wine growing.
The lake has only froze 3 times in the last 100 years. 2013, horrible year. And then 1976, and then 1918. So because it does not freeze, it is so deep, 614 feet and 38 miles long, as you said. With north to south winds, it doesn't freeze. It acts as a buffer, a temperature buffer for the surrounding land. With the exception of being 10 degrees colder in the winter, our climate is the exact same as Dijon, France. We have the same growing degree days, we have the same length of season, we're just a little bit colder in the winter. But in the Finger Lakes, it can get down into the negatives. But with Seneca Lake right at our feet, we are able to kind of be in this microclimate where it will mitigate that temperature differentiation to a point where even a mile up and down the lake dependent, it can change drastically. Our section of the lake, there's about a 4-mile section that's typically 5 degrees warmer than the rest of the lake. And a lot of that's due to the lake directly west of us, which is Keuka, the one that is shaped like a Y. The right off the bluff is also the deepest point there. And though it freezes often, when it does get some really cold stuff, the lake will actually heat up the weather pattern. And as it rolls over that western hill onto Seneca Lake, it will be a little bit warmer right over your left shoulder there than it will be even a mile up the road. So our farm is quite protected from that. And then, of course, you go to the other side and it's a little bit warmer still because the lake never really gets below 45 degrees.
Really interesting. So I want to say hi to Kathy in Vermont, who just shared, she's the Vagabond Vintner. I don't know if you guys know each other, but I do want to, it sort of prompts me, she put in the chat some interesting notes about her experience at Fulkerson. At a certain point in time, 2 things happened. Well, at 2 different points in time. One, you started growing grapes and making wine. But then to Kathy's point in her note in the chat, you also became known as the Winemakers Winery. So what brought 2 questions? What started you growing grapes and making wine, not just growing black raspberries and such? And then number 2, why is Fulkerson known as the Winemakers Winery?
So to that end, we, from about 1805 to about the mid-teens, 19-teens, we were a sustenance farm. We did a little bit of commercial crops. By the 1920s, we were growing raspberries, and then the raspberry blight came through the area and basically wiped out the entire crop in the 60s. By mid-70s, we were mostly grapes. And at the time, it was really my grandfather, Roger Fulkerson, that was handling that. And then my father, who got his start at Glenora Wine Cellars under John Williams, which is now, he owns Frog's Leap out in Napa Valley. He worked there for a few years, and they had purchased a Jensen Juice plant from Penn Yan, New York on Keuka Lake, and moved it down to Seneca, and quickly realized it was a lot of work. And well, Dad liked doing it, so he purchased the juice plant in 1979 and was able to use our own crops from the farm, but as well as buying others from other surrounding farms to sell as home winemaking juice. And that grew from a few hundred members in the 1970s to almost 10,000 now. And I'd say on an average of those 10,000 people, about 2,300 to 3,000 people come through our door and buy grape juice every year and make about 30,000 gallons, or about 15,000 case equivalent. We stock a full supply of home winemaking supplies, and it's a seasonal juice, but all year round we give advice to anybody who needs it for their winemaking, whether or not they buy it here. Our philosophy on that is, as long as you're fermenting something, we're in good shape.
That's so interesting. So how many people are now come to Fulkerson and get the materials to make their own wines?
Around 5,000 a year.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's just for their own consumption. Obviously, they can't market it.
Correct. Under New York State, or New York State and U.S. federal law, if you sell wine, you need a license.
Right.
They want their money.
We're seeing some photos here of the harvest,
so that's our Riesling vineyard that we'll be tasting with the semi-dry soon.
Got it. And then more shots of the lake, obviously.
We don't get the sunsets, but we do sure have some really nice sunrises.
This is sunrise. So you're on the western side of the lake, and we're looking east here, obviously.
Yeah, and this is about 6:15 in the morning, mid-October.
Linda has a question. What year was your winery's first vintage?
1988 was our first vintage. We had a Cornell hybrid called Matinee that we called Matinee at the time. We had a Riesling, a Ravat 51 Vignole, same grape, different common name. And then we also made what we called Heritage White, which is a Cayuga, similar to Riesling, another Cornell hybrid, but at the time it wasn't named yet. So we just called it Heritage White. So four wines.
Excellent. And I'm sorry, was the first wine you made a Riesling?
Riesling was included in our first vintage, yeah.
It was. All right. Hit the chat, everybody watching, if you know Riesling, if you're a fan of Riesling, or conversely, if you don't know Riesling at all.
So Riesling is a big misnomer. A lot of people think Riesling's sweet. Riesling can be sweet. The same thing as any other wine can be sweet, but we make 7 different Rieslings, from completely dry, 0% residual sugar, all the way to an ice wine, everything in between. And then we also do a tequila barrel aged Riesling, which unfortunately is out of stock, but we're working on it. And a skin fermented Riesling, which is what we call orange wine. The skins give that tannin and color to the wine, and funny enough, the color of a white wine is orange.
Got it. And just, this is kind of fun to show people around a bit. For anybody watching, this is the tasting house, the tasting room, which you're sitting in right now, Stephen.
Yes, I'm sitting on the north end of our tasting room, where anybody coming in would come in. They'd grab a tasting flight, and they would have a seat.
And then we found this fun picture on the Fulkerson website, which I thought was cool, and that was these folks, which is at your house, yeah?
So that's my parents' house, but we wanted to kind of show what the spirit of the Finger Lakes was, and there are a lot of places in the Finger Lakes that you can stay that have that experience. Yeah, so make sure you look around when you're booking your trip.
We're gonna start tasting wines in a moment here. When's the best time to come visit the Finger Lakes?
Every time, all the time.
Even in February.
Even in February. So right now you're going to get one-on-one treatment. You'll be a royal coming through anybody's door. We get a little bit busier on the weekends. It can get a little more crazy, but the winter is a really nice, intimate wine experience. Typically, the owners are out in the tasting rooms. If they're not in the tasting rooms, they're probably bottling wine or out trimming. In the spring, it just smells great. Spring smell. The leaves are just coming out. The grass is growing. You can kind of see the vines like right as they're coming out of dormancy. In the summer, of course, it's just growing season and green and beautiful, and you can swim in the lake. And you said that it almost looks like you can swim across it. We do swim across it every year. And then in the fall, of course, just the smell of grapes and the fall colors. And then getting back into winter again, you get into these nice, just romantic atmospheres that you can have a one-on-one really fun experience.
You got to do me a favor. You got to move the region down closer to New York City.
We are only a short bus ride away.
Because we have, as you know, Stephen, we have a really fun, really cool tour that we do at New York Wine Events called Day Trip to Wine Country, many of which I lead myself. And we go to the Hudson Valley to some amazing award-winning wineries. We go to the North Fork of Long Island, same thing. And we just can't, it's not a day trip. We can't.
I don't know. I do those New York, I do Brooklyn Crush on a down and back.
By the way, thank you for reminding me. I was remiss. For anybody watching knows that during non-COVID times, we do some big food and wine and culinary festivals. And Stephen and the Fulkerson Winery family and team, God bless their hearts, have been big participants for many years in a lot of our big festival events like Brooklyn Crush, the New York City Autumn Wine and Food Festival, and others. And we can't wait to get you guys back there.
We miss it down there.
For those.
Sure do.
But anyway, well, we're gonna get, as soon as Elon Musk invents like a, kind of a flying taxi van, we'll come up to the Finger Lakes on a jet propelled vehicle.
You hire a bus with two drivers. You have one drive up in early morning, spend the day, and then you get back late.
Excellent. Well, you know what's really cool? We got some Riesling fans, and we have some Finger Lakes fans. Lara is a big fan of dry Rieslings. How many of your 7 Rieslings are dry Rieslings?
So our reserve Riesling is 0% residual. Dry Riesling is 0.9 to 1.2, depending on balance. In some years, the semi-dry can be considered dry, but it's all based on a 1-to-1 ratio of acid. And it depends on balance, really. With our tequila barrel aged Riesling, it's typically hovering around 0.7 to 1.7 residual, again, depending on balance. And then our skin fermented Riesling is totally dry. So we have 4 out of the 9.
4 out of the 9 are relatively dry or dry. And we have some folks who their Riesling is their favorite varietal, but they've never
4
been
of 7, sorry.
Finger Lakes. Norman's a huge fan of Riesling, but hasn't been. Norman, you got to go. And other big fans as well. Actually, we have a fan of the Red Newt at Fulkerson, which is another wine. We're not actually.
So Red Newt is across the lake from us. They are a great winery, just directly across. So you can actually see their tasting room from our tasting room.
And then I love Arlene's comment is dry Riesling, great with Chinese and Thai. I would concur. I think the semi-dry would be good with a spicy Thai as well.
Semi-dry is such a chameleon. We'll talk about it here in a minute.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, it's Deborah is the Riesling fan, not Norm. So I'm glad we cleared that up. All right. Yeah, Riesling is amazing with Asian food. All right. Let's get into tasting. I think the first one we've got 4 wines lined up. And they're all really, really accessibly priced. The first one is a Zweigelt, which is an Austrian grape. And Stephen and Cindy, tell us about this one. It's a red wine. I'll put it up on the screen momentarily here, but tell us about this one.
Cindy, you want to take over, or?
Okay, sure. I mean, you know so much about everything that goes on there from start to finish. I'm fascinated listening to you all the time. But the Zweigelt is actually a very interesting bottle. This is the only one that the Fulkersons buy the grape from a neighboring vineyard. And that's the only thing that he grows is Zweigelt. So it's a Austrian varietal, grows great in the Finger Lakes. It can be very prolific. It can also have its problems, but flavor profile on this one, you will find it to be, I always say, kind of a Pinot Noir on steroids. It's got the softness like a Pinot Noir would, but it's got a little bit more richness to it. One of those reds that's perfect with pork and some chicken dishes, as well as your typical red meats. I like it a little bit chilled. When people say serve a red room temperature, they don't mean 70 degrees. You know, take it down to 65, 60 to 65. And it's just a really soft, beautiful, rich red.
Now, Cindy and Stephen, this one is a medium body, right? I have it actually up on the screen here. It's medium body, am I right?
So yeah, this is a medium-bodied red, where you would consider medium to light. We oak it very lightly.
Mm-hmm.
Our philosophy, along with Farm First, is also grape. We want to give you what Mother Nature gives us, rather than trying to whack it with oak and hide stuff that we might not want to see, or that we may want to change because we think it's supposed to be something else. What we try to do is give you what the grape is, and what our specific climate and farm can produce. This, as Cindy said, is grown by Frank Gelati. He's about 3 miles south of us. And we're so proud of that. We put it right on the label. It's at Gelati Vineyards, Zweigelt. And we also make it really easy for you. Right on the back panel, we have a panel that says some icons. So this we pair with fish and pork. We tell you to serve between 62 and 67 and use a Burgundy glass if you have one. Otherwise, I always say, favorite glass is the one in my hand and my favorite wine is the one in the glass. So.
And is this medium acid? Yeah.
So the tannin structure being very light, we utilize just because it does have a really nice soft acidity. As Cindy was saying, very Pinot-esque. It's got that kind of subtle blackberry and a little bit of kind of cherry. To Catherine's question, French oak, we typically use 3 to 5 year old barrels, French and American, depending on the year. We really do make sure that, on every year we're tasting that juice, tasting the wine as it's being made, and then before we put it into the barrels, we evaluate what type of oak. French oak is typically a little softer than American oak, and then Hungarian is somewhere in between. A new fad is also Austrian oak. We haven't been able to find any out here, but yes, mostly French, Hungarian, and American barrels. Again, we try not to overdo it. This particular vintage, the 2017, had, I think, 3 months of oak, and they were barrels, so it was really, really light and subtle.
Limited time, so you're not going to get that overwhelming. And as Stephen had said before, and I can't reiterate enough, with any of our reds, you're not drinking it to taste the barrel. You're drinking it to taste the wine itself, to taste the grape and all the properties that it imparts. So they're very, very careful about the amount of oak and the type of oak that goes in it. So it's not going to be big and chewy and heavy. It's very soft and complementary to the grape itself.
What I will say is that the Finger Lakes has some of the best reds in the world. If you're looking for a super jammy, super fruit, Southern California or Central Valley or red, we don't have it. But what we do have is these really nice, balanced, low alcohol. By low, I mean like 12, 13 range. and they're very much European style or European profiles. But we definitely have our own style here, and I definitely encourage you, if you're on the kind of the tipping point, like I kind of want to try reds, Zweigelt's a really good starting point.
And give everybody a sense, because obviously people don't necessarily have this wine in front of them, and not everybody knows Zweigelt, which is the grape type, the grape varietal from Austria originally. If people are familiar with Pinot Noir or Merlot, or what would you compare it to? It's obviously not a big red Zinfandel from California. It's not a big heavy cab. What would you compare it to for more common red grapes?
It would definitely be, I mean, as far as an American counterpart would be Washington, Oregon, Pinot.
Pinot, okay.
So
That's what I thought.
Pinot would be in that family range of flavor profiles. A
Pinot.
lighter Pinot, high acid.
And just as a little hint to people that don't know, sometimes you can tell by the shape of the bottle too what's going to get in it. Typically, you will find this shape bottle. Pinot Noirs come in this shape bottle. Zweigelts, Burgundies, if you're going to go French, any of the Rhone wines. And those all tend to be a little bit softer, a little bit more subtle. When you go into the Bordeaux shape bottles is when you're going to get the more intense flavors, and some like the Cabernet Sauvignons and things like that, as far as the vinifera style wines go.
Absolutely. Well,
Cindy makes a really good point. In the Finger Lakes, our wineries have always tried to keep their packaging relatively on the traditional European packaging style. So sweeter Rieslings will go into brown or antique green bottles. Dry Rieslings typically are in green bottles. Dry reds are in either Bordeaux or Burgundy bottles, depending on, of course, the varietal. So you can't always judge a book by its cover, but in the Finger Lakes, if you see a Burgundy bottle, it's probably got a lot of Burgundy character.
Yeah. So very quickly before we move on to the next one, favorite best meal to pair with this Zweigelt?
Oh, pork belly.
Pork belly. Okay.
Yeah, like a pancetta.
And Cindy, do you have one?
I was going to say a tenderloin.
Tenderloin. Okay, so
or lamb. I love it.
It's got enough oomph that it can hold up to a nice meat dish.
Absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the Riesling, and we're gonna kick this off with a question from Norman, or maybe Deborah, not sure which. So what's the difference between your Riesling and the Rieslings that you get from Mosul in Germany?
Most regional wines, at least readily available in the United States, are going to have a certain style. The main difference is probably just winemaking style in general. Old world wines tend to be a little, I can't really explain it. But you can find a style like that here.
I think, in my opinion, I think Moselle wines tend to be a little more floral, a little bit more on the floral side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And ours are a little more on the kind of stone fruit.
A little more, stone fruit, but a little bit more citrus, a little bit more, acidic, and a little more bitter in a good way. I find the ones from Europe are terrific, but you can really tell the difference when you have, especially an Alsatian Riesling, which is not what Norman was asking about. It's very different.
So this is our semi-dry. It comes in at 2.5% residual sugar. We utilize a very heavy clay alluvial soil. So this is below the ancient lake bed. Our farm is situated both above and below an ancient lake bed from about 12,000 years ago, when the Wisconsin glaciation retreated. It dammed up the St. Lawrence River, and there was one giant lake from Lake Superior to basically Montreal. And that lake was called Lake Newberry, and we're right on the shore of that ancient lake. We have a stream just south of us that dumped a whole bunch of sediment over those millennia into the lake. And this Riesling is grown on this super deep clay loam. And those minerals and the acidity that is generated from those really have a nice rounding effect, especially when there's a little bit of residual sugar. So with this one, it's so soft, and it can be even served a little bit on the warmer side, and as it warms up, the florals kind of come out a little bit. What's really nice about this wine is that you can just relax, in front of the fire or on a beach on the hot day. Either place it deserves a space, but with food, this is where this wine shines. So with savory cream-based dishes, say pasta or like a cheese-based dish, it's dry and it tastes dry. But with spicy or Asian styles, it goes sweet, especially with like high spice. So this will go really well with Thai, for example, like hot Thai.
I was going to say like a Thai dish that's spicy and hot, and it's got a nice, saltiness to it.
Yeah, you need to cut that heat somehow, and
yeah, exactly.
It's such a chameleon. So depending on the situation, it'll taste dry or sweet. For my palate, it's a little weird just kind of enjoying it on its own, because it's like here, and this is dry, this is sweet, and my palate cannot tell if it's dry or sweet. It's that much of a chameleon.
And again, on the back of our label, and we do this for all our vinifera wines, you'll see that we have what they call the IRF sweetness label on it. So you'll be able to see it goes anywhere from dry up to sweet, and it'll tell you exactly where you are on the scale too. So people tend to get afraid of Rieslings because, let's say, if you buy just something labeled Riesling, oftentimes you won't have the scale, and you don't know if you're getting something that's tending towards the sweeter side or the drier side. So we'd like to let everybody know that they can tell exactly from our label what it is that they're going to expect in the wine too.
Can you hold that one up closer, Cindy?
Yep. So you're going to see this scale here will tell you everything from dry to your sweet side, and you will always have an arrow there that shows.
That's based on a ratio of acid to sugar. So anything below a 1-to-1 acid is dry. From a 1-to-2 ratio is medium. 1-to-3, I believe, is going to be medium sweet, and then anything above 1-to-4 is going to be considered sweet.
And I do find that the Riesling grape tends to be, for a lot of the public, the most misunderstood grape, only because there's been the sense that it's a sweet wine, because maybe all they've had is, back in the day, and I'm aging myself, Blue Nun. Blue Nun was, that was the Riesling. That was the only Riesling anybody knew, was Blue Nun. So everybody always thought that that's what Riesling tasted like. And now we make 7 different varieties, so you can get something for every palate.
Yeah, so this one sounds like it's not quite as sweet as, like, there's some popular Rieslings now, like Relax Riesling, which is relatively sweet.
Norman has a good point. He had to learn how to speak German to know how sweet his Mosul was, and our Deborah, and the International Riesling Foundation, or the IRF, we use the scale on all of our wines because it's a nice, easy scale, and it works. But we are founding members of that organization. I would recommend Googling it. It'll tell you all about the scale, and if you look at wines, a lot of wines, especially in the Finger Lakes, we're huge proponents of it. We'll have that scale on it. It makes it a lot easier to purchase when you're in the store.
Yeah, no, that's hugely.
Because again, you might have that Zweigelt, and you go, I don't know what Zweigelt is, but let me turn it around. And you have that same scale on the back that will tell you that this is a dry wine. So it'll give you. That's one of the first things that people look for, dry or sweet, when they're choosing a wine. So this way there's no confusion.
It's one of the principal flavor characteristics of wine tasting. You know,
Absolutely.
it's a
I just tasted a
building.
little bit of that Sparklin Diamond, and oh man, is it good.
All right, so now talk about a segue, Stephen. So now there's some people watching tonight who have been regulars and join us on a relatively regular basis, and thank you for that. It's awesome to see a number of you. Hi, Nancy and Stephanie. You know, the fact of the matter is that everyone's heard me talk ad nauseum, I admit, about find a new grape, discover a new grape. And so tonight, I myself am finding and discovering a completely new grape. This grape is called Diamond. And I'm going to let Stephen describe it, but this is a grape varietal that I've never come across. I don't know anything about. And there's this really cool wine you guys make called the Sparklin Diamond. What is Diamond grape and what is this wine all about?
Sparklin Diamond with a L-I-N apostrophe. It's Sparklin because they wouldn't let us call it Sparkling. We applied to the federal government for the label to say Sparkling Diamond, and they said in order for it to be sparkling, it has to be naturally carbonated. We force carbonate this. We contract with a neighboring winery, Lakewood Vineyards, and they force carbonate it for us. Put it in the bottle. It's a grape called Moore's Diamond, originally from the Virginia Carolinas area, and this almost has like a pineapple daiquiri type flavor profile. It's really intriguing. It's a native hybrid, so it has a little bit of that kind of native character, but it's not as sharp. This wine is sweet. And sparkly. It's got effervescence in it, and I love it so much. I'm a Cabernet Franc fan. Cabernet Sauvignon, the Zweigeld is one of my main go-tos. I can't get enough of this Sparkling Diamond. The problem with this is I usually pour it into a pint glass, or I make a margarita with it.
Now, do you drink this? Does one drink this one quite chilled or just somewhat chilled?
So I'll drink this fridge temp. Yeah,
Fridge
definitely.
temp, okay.
So yeah, right out of the fridge, probably, you know, what is that, 40. But it's really good. I mean, it's been sitting on my tray here for about a half hour now, and it's probably 55 degrees, and it's gorgeous. As it warms up throughout your meal or throughout your glass, you're going to kind of taste different things. The floral characters, the more kind of almost grapey, for lack of a better word. When we think grapey, we think Niagara, like Welch's white grape juice. And it has a little bit of that character to it. But yeah, one of my favorite things to do with this particular wine is a shot of tequila, a shot of white tequila, a shot of tart cherry juice, and then fill the rest of the glass with the Sparkling Diamond.
Oh wow! So you can use this as a mixing component in a cocktail.
Yeah, it's my favorite drink. Is a Sparkling Diamond cherry margarita.
That sounds really cool. What's the alcohol content in Sparkling Diamond?
It's about 10.5.
So this is easy drinking. This is you're not gonna get in trouble.
Well, you might. We call this a 2-bottle wine. You get to the end of the first bottle and you're like, oh, I should have got 2.
But one of the questions was, is this considered a dessert wine? And I would say no, because it can be, but at the same time, the carbonation, when we say that it's sweet, it's more considered a medium sweet, and the carbonation pulls it back a little bit, so it lightens it up significantly. Just as we were talking how the semi-dry Rieslings go with Thai food and Asian food, things like that. Same with the Sparkling Diamond. You're going to have that same effect because it has that wonderful mid-sweetness to it without being over the top sweet.
So it's not like ginger ale. It's not going to be sweet like that.
No, not like that. And I tell everybody that if you like Prosecco, it's kind of in between a Prosecco and an Asti, you know, because an Asti Spumani, that was the thing everybody was drinking years ago, but it's very, very sweet. And a Prosecco people think is dry, but that's considered more of a medium dry. So you have, this is that nice in between for everybody who needs that little bit more on it too.
And it's got the acidity. So Steve just answered Catherine's question. It's got some acidity there to balance that, the sweetness. Is it,
Catherine,
Nancy?
Sorry to interrupt you there,
Yep.
Sam. Catherine, that's a really good point. You know, we had mentioned balance with the semi-dry Riesling. Our philosophy is always balance here. With our sweet wines, you know, we aim for balance over anything. A lot of places will be like, no, this needs to be X amount of % sugar. You know, everybody's had those Moscatos where you almost need a glass of water too, where you're like Moscato and you're like, oh, it's so cloying, you know, I need a glass of water to almost wash it down. Our wines are all about balance. And the Sparklin Diamond, our Matinee, our Moscato, Pink Moscato, Sweet Riesling, they're all made in a way where we actually stop the fermentation early to preserve that acidity and those natural grape flavors. So it's a little bit lower in alcohol, a little bit higher in sugar, but they're all grape sugars. And they're so balanced and just so easy drinking that because of that, you actually, you know, Sam, you can get in trouble with these because they're so easy drinking. But
Yeah.
If you stop at the first bottle, you'll be fine.
You know what? That's the problem, is that with these delicious lower alcohol content wines, yet there's a volume issue, which is you just consume more.
One thing I also like with this, if you cut up fruit, strawberries or even peaches, put it in the bottom of your glass and then pour this on top. It makes a wonderful cocktail, as well as you love to eat the fruit afterwards. So just as a nice, refreshing, makes you think spring.
Oh yeah.
So to Nancy's question, it's not necessarily a dessert wine.
No.
No.
It's definitely food friendly because of, again, if we were explaining the acid balance on it.
Yep.
This is definitely a chill wine. Like, just kind of sit on the couch and have a good time.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna go to number 4, the name of which I love, the Red Zeppelin, which is made another grape 2 in one night that I've never heard of. It's made from Catawba, which is a local regional grape from the Finger Lakes, correct, Steve?
Catawba, Catawba. It's 50% Catawba, and then we utilize a blend of oaked and unoaked reds, dry reds, to kind of give it the same character every year, which I describe as a red Jolly Rancher. But again, very balanced. It's about the balance of acidity. So the Catawba is a really interesting grape. It's pink. The color off the press can range from a light orange to a super dark red, depending on the year and the how cold it is. We are notoriously inconsistent on our weather patterns. You know, for example, 2 years ago it was wet and wet and wet, cold and wet, and last year we barely got any rain. I think we got 4 inches of rain all summer. You know, thank goodness, from some of the deeper soils that we have. So it can kind of change year to year. But the way that we kind of do this wine, we get this flavor profile of a red Jolly Rancher, like a cherry Jolly Rancher, and it's very much like what's the stuff with the red wine and the fruit? Why am I drawing a blank right now?
Oh, sangria?
Sangria. Yeah, it's like a sangria kind of already pre-made. All you need is an orange slice in your glass and you're good to go. But it's so good. It's really good.
This is a red that you want to chill. This is the red that you would serve with pizza and chicken wings and barbecue.
Hot wings are huge for this. It actually really goes well with salty stuff. Like if you've ever been to Western New York, there's this thing called beef on Weck, and Weck is like this kind of think of it as a like a just a hamburger bun, but it's got like these big old rock salt crystals on it, and
Fries your roll with caraway
like
and
roast beef with, it's almost like an au jus sandwich, but the sweetness kind of like melds with that salt. It's really nice.
And how did you come to name it Red Zeppelin?
So originally, it was a reference to Led Zeppelin, and we were kind of all drinking one night, and we were like, well, what are we gonna call it? Like, we've come up with this amazing wine. What are we gonna call it? And Misty Mountain Hop came on the radio, and we're like, why don't we just call it Red Zeppelin? And it stuck. We are slowly positioning the brand a little bit differently, more of a travel brand, kind of come fly with us, come discover, because our Zeppelin series, which right now is 5 wines, includes our Sparklin Diamond, our Still Diamond, Airship White, which is a Niagara-based wine, Sunset Blush, which, don't let Franzia fool you, we were first. Our Sunset Blush is 100% Catawba. And then we're hopefully going to add a dry rosé to that, but they're going to be more kind of that fun, easygoing, just kind of relax and discover a new thing with us type of wine.
That's great. That's great.
And I just want to add, I see that you put our discount up there too. And on top of that, we have $19 flat rate shipping. Now, Stephen, is that just to New York?
So we ship to about a dozen states direct, and then we use Vino Shipper, a partner, to ship to most other states. Unfortunately, there's a few states like that we can ship to, but it's special rules. Like, we have to ship an entire case to California, and then there's a couple of shipping charges because it's got to go to like their warehouse, and then Alabama is a full case as well, but it has to go to a liquor store. Our full list can be seen right on our contact page, and if you go to our website, you click your state. Only the states that we ship to show up on that list. You click on your state, it'll push you to the right site to purchase our stuff. The discount code, you do need to put it in NYWINE, New York Wine. We'll get you 20% off 6 bottles tonight. Actually, through the end of the month.
That code will last for 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, Stephen?
Yeah, that code will expire on March 1st.
March 1st, right. So we have some time. I'm dying to get the Sparklin Diamond.
Make sure you get a couple. You're gonna like it.
Yeah.
You're gonna love that.
Well, this has been great, and I want to thank you guys for joining us, and thank everybody for tuning in. It's a wintry. For those of you who are tuning in from other states like California, we're having a very wintry time here in New York State. Lots of snow and very cold. So it's good to warm up with some wine. And I want to thank Fulkerson Winery and Cindy and Stephen for joining us, and those of you for tuning in.
Cheers.
We will be back next week. We're going to travel to Sonoma County in California and taste a real range of wines. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon. And Cindy and Steve, stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you. Keep the snow down there.
We will. All right. Take care now.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.